Welcome to The Mission Matters. The Mission Matters is a partnership of Missio Nexus and 1615 Missions Coaching, who have a shared passion to mobilize God's people to be a part of His mission. The Mission Matters is hosted by Matthew Ellison of 1615 Missions Coaching and Ted Essler, president of Missio Nexus. Scanning the globe for people groups that are unreached, we find ourselves gazing through what's been named the 1040 window. Located in the Western Hemisphere between 10 and 40 degrees north of the equator, encompassing parts of Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, is a population nearly unreached by the gospel. Bob Blincoe wants to change that. President of Frontiers, the international missionary organization sending teams of ordinary Christians for long-term service in the Muslim world. Today we talk with Bob about reaching the Middle East, Frontiers, and even his favorite soup. On The Mission Matters, here's Matthew, Ted, and Bob Blincoe to discuss whether or not churches should still be sending missionaries to the unreached.
Welcome once again to the Mission Matters podcast. I am Matthew Ellison, joined as always by my good friend and co-host Ted Essler. Ted, how are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you, man?
This is round two. People don't know, but we just recorded a podcast prior to this, so hopefully we have stamina.
Yeah, plus I kicked my cat out of the room, so he's not going to try to flop his tail in front of the camera.
Yeah, if you watched our last podcast or listened to it, Ted's cat showed up in the podcast.
Yeah.
Great. Hey, listen, Ted, this is a surprise question today. I didn't even tell you about it, but I know you're a bit of an amateur chef and cook. Maybe more than that. You're pretty skilled, and it's something I also love to do. I'd like to know your favorite food to prepare, your favorite food to cook, maybe eat as well. But what's your favorite thing to prepare?
Well, I'll tell you, it took me many attempts to get it to where I feel like I can really make this well. But I've finally been able to make beef brisket on it's like a big green egg. It's a Kamado grill. We do it over about 26 hours. And it's so fun because it tastes just like it does in a good smokehouse. And, it took a long time to prepare. That's one of them. I got a couple of them, but we'll stop with that.
So that's interesting. One of my favorite things to do is use my smoker as well. And I've been working about 15 years on perfecting the pork shoulder, the Boston butt, as it's known in the cooking world, which is the butt end of the shoulder, by the way. And so it's a very fatty piece of meat. I do a Southern style preparation. I will brine it in molasses and salt, usually for about 24 hours. Then I do a rub. And then I smoke it with mesquite or hickory for about 16, 18 hours. But the key is to serve it with a mustard-based barbecue sauce, not the ketchup-based barbecue sauce. So, Ted, I'm going to have to make it for you sometime.
I'm in. You don't have to convince me to try that out. Well, we have a guest today, of course. Bob Blincoe is with us. And, Bob, we're going to put that same question to you and then have you introduce yourself. Is there something you like to cook?
Wow. Yeah, thanks. I like to cook a shrimp soup that I first tasted in Bangkok when my wife and I lived there 40 years ago. And now that you can find the curry here in the United States, we like to cook this shrimp soup. Tom yum goong, it's called. Goong is the word for shrimp, and tom yum is a soup. And now you can get the cilantro and put it in, and it really does take you back to the days of Thailand.
And it sounds really good, too.
Yeah.
So, Bob, let's just kind of start things out. Could you tell people that are listening who you are? What do you do? And what your role is in this huge community in the Great Commission?
I'm Bob Blincoe, and my wife is Jan. We have 3 grown children. We sold our possessions and moved overseas to the Middle East in 1990. By the Lord's providence, we were the first missionary family to live in Iraq in the 1990s. And then in the year 2000, I became director of Frontiers in the United States, a U.S. Senate base. And I'm president of Frontiers at this time. So what a great privilege to be part of the great effort to bring the hope of Jesus Christ to some of the least and last peoples of the world.
Amen to that. And our listeners should know that Bob is one of our plenary speakers for our upcoming Missio Nexus virtual conference, the Mission Leaders Conference. And I've heard a couple of the other plenaries, Bob, and the bar's set pretty high, brother. So we'll see how you do there.
So, Ted, I'm going to do a plug for you guys here. If people aren't registered, how do they register?
Just go to missionexus.org and look for Focus 2020 Spotlight. I'll tell you, we have this speaker from the UK. Her name is Kate Coleman, and she addresses a wide swath of issues that we're facing globally, not COVID related, but social justice related, and how that impacts the Great Commission. And what I really like about her talk is it's very easy for us to have a provincial view of these issues when we live in the U.S. And she brings I wouldn't even call it a UK perspective. She brings a global perspective to it. It's just a phenomenal talk. And so I look forward to hearing it again. I'll probably listen to it once or twice more before the conference because I have it here.
Great. Well, I hope people do register. I think it's an important event, especially since we couldn't gather together. This is an alternative.
Yeah.
So, Bob, there's a conversation that Ted and I are hearing a lot today, and it's not a new conversation. And it is this idea that the support model of missionary sending is really dying a slow death. And that's probably been intensified by COVID because, of course, the runway to the field is quite long right now for a lot of folks who are in the chute. And what we're hearing about is we need to be seeking alternatives, BAM, indigenous partnerships, native missionaries, whatever you want to call it. And so I wonder, do you think that the support model, this model of local churches identifying, raising up, and supporting sent ones is dying?
One cannot put his shoulder to every controversy that we have in the Christian world, but this one seems to me important and worth at least raising my voice on. Does this concern come out of the idea that we should feel sorry for missionaries, that their life is too hard just even to raise support to go? Have we missed the great reality and the great joy that they're going to do mission where dying is gain, and that they're going to be more like Christ? They're going to be apostles as Christ was. Are we trying to find some way to make up for the great glory that it is to people to be senders and to be the missionary community that stands behind someone? This is the first problem that I see with this, is that the Great Commission did not say all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth. Find somebody else to go and you will fulfill the Great Commission. Jesus didn't say, as the Father sent me, so I'm going to go find somebody else to go just because the economics demand it. Can you imagine the first century, how many difficulties there were with plague or disease and travel and obstacles in order to send missionaries? So I'm first of all concerned biblically that we stay true to this mandate, that we go and we overcome the difficulties that may be put in front of us at this time. I think of David Livingstone, who said, "I never made a sacrifice." You know, people worry that I might have given up something in order to be the missionary in Africa. But is it a sacrifice which brings such blessing to the one who goes? So come on, I want to encourage all those that do feel they're called to go, not to give up on that sense of calling, but to link yourself with a church which wants to send you and an agency which wants to make sure that happens and overcome. And then to the donors who, what, are we looking for a good deal? We're looking for a heck of a deal, maybe, to go find a way to send 20 national workers instead of the missionary, who is so expensive. A couple of problems with that, but first of all, we have to be scriptural and send those that are really called to go, and remember that there's no substitute in becoming like Christ to be part of that effort to enjoy the fellowship of his sufferings by going where dying is gain.
So, Bob, I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate, maybe literally here today. I don't know. We'll see. But I think one of the pushbacks with the sending model as we have it today is it's obviously not a universal model in Scripture. Mm-hmm. I would say a lot of people would feel that it was born 250, 275 years ago, in that it was born out of a colonialistic era, and that we are continuing to promote these ideas of colonialism, imperialism, as we send Westerners as missionaries.
Mm. Yeah, that's been a attack for 100 years. You know that 100 years ago, the Archbishop of England said that we now have a witness on 6 continents. We've got witnesses all over the world, and we can stop sending missionaries. Of course, we don't go back 100 years or even 250. We want to go back to the Holy Spirit, which sends people in the book of Acts, that sends people in the manner that the Father sent the Son. So let us, first of all, recapture the sense of what it means to be the church, to be the sending church, and not suppose that this model is either pragmatic or recent in development. As the Father has sent me, so send I you, and go into all the world and preach the gospel. These are the texts which still call the church to be the sending church. Yes, I understand the obstacles of the times and the difficulties with which we now live and serve. But I tell you what, it seems to me, at least my own experience with Frontiers, that the donors are sacrificing in this time to make sure that they are continuing to support their missionaries. It is a blessing to them, and we don't want to deny that to them.
So, Bob, one of the things that surfaces a lot, and you've already hit on it a little bit, is that this model is financially unsustainable. You mentioned pragmatism, so they're looking at this just through natural lenses. I get that. But, you know, they talk about the most bang for the buck, which you already mentioned. Do you believe that the support model is, in fact, sustainable?
Yes, let me refer to one of the most well-known articulate articles on this point of view of supporting those who are nationals out there. It's from Revolution and World Mission by K.P. Yohanan. And he made the classic case for this, saying, tens of thousands of native missionaries are being raised up by the Lord in the 2/3 world right now. They are Asians. Many of them already live in the nation where they must be reached or in nearby cultures. The primary message I have for every Christian pastor and mission leader is that we are witnessing a new day in missions. We can help make it possible. Here's where he offers the heck of a deal. We can make it possible for millions of Asians to move out with the liberating gospel of Jesus Christ. So that message is out there. I'm trying to deal, first of all, scripturally with the reason to send. But now, as to the model, look, it looks to Americans as though this opportunity to focus your giving on locals out there will bring about the planting of churches among peoples that are in the Hindu, in the Buddhist, and the Muslim cultures of India, Pakistan, Chad, these different ideas. Caveat emptor, let the buyer beware on this. The New Testament outcome that matters most is mentioned in Romans chapter 16, verse 3, when Paul thanks Priscilla and Aquila. Read Priscilla and Aquila for me. They risk their necks for me. All of the churches of the Gentiles, greet them. Churches of the Gentiles, ekklesion ton ethnon. This refers to the planting of churches who are not of people that are not being accreted onto the existing churches of their time, but are starting churches comprised of Gentiles and governed by Gentiles. And this reality is something that I find almost never happens when you simply give money and expect that locals out there are going to do the work of planting churches among people that are not their kind, churches of Muslim background believers, churches of Hindus. This great reality of the Bible is hardly one that even the Jews were willing to bring about with Paul. Count the number of people that Paul had on his missionary teams over the years. There are 28 to 32. Only 4 of them were Jewish people. Priscilla and Aquila planted churches among the Gentiles, and there's 2 others mentioned in Colossians 4. The others were all Gentiles themselves who were recruited by Paul to plant churches among their own people. So the great thing that has to happen, whether by employing and paying nationals through the method that we're reviewing right now, or by expensive North Americans, is to plant churches among the Gentiles. And that great outcome is worth a little more auditing than we've seen in the past or until now with the methods that are out there. Here's an example. My friend, Dr. Rajendra, who was head of the India Mission Association, get this, 50,000 members of the India Mission Association, all of them local Indian people who are on the payroll of people from North America. 50,000 Indians already on the payroll. But Dr. Rajendra said, I cannot find 50 among those 50,000 who are willing to even talk to Muslims about the faith. So there's an accumulation of bias out there in the India world, in the world of Chad and Sudan, that is hard for us to imagine. So let's not simply think that, oh, brown people, they can do the work among people that are also like them. It's a much more, it needs a lot more investigation to find out the truth of what Dr. Rajendra is finding, for example. Yes, the India people will find many Indians to work among, but they're usually the Dalits like they themselves are, or the historical Christian people. So let me illustrate. You get an American delegation which goes over to India and investigates for themselves, come back with the delightful fact that they have found an Indian evangelist who's already trained 20 more, and all they need is money, American money, in order to make their evangelism work. And so the church shifts its funding to these 20 and gets wonderful reports. We see pictures of them standing up and preaching the gospel. But we have to ask then the further question, are they reaching their own kind of people with more and more good work, which may be the outcome you want? Or are they planting churches among the Gentiles? That is, the Muslims, the Hindus, the great populations of Asia, which are yet to be populated with Christian churches.
So, Ted and I try to be provocateurs on this show. Sometimes we take sides, sometimes we just press and poke. But I agree with you. This whole idea that this model is not sustainable is ridiculous. We fund and support the things we love. If we love sending, if we love God's glory, then we'll find a way to fund it. I just don't buy this at all. So I'm with you, brother.
Well, love finds a way, and love is grown a great deal when you send your own missionaries. I don't want to end up saying both and or anything works. I want to say we have to find the way that we will bring about the great biblical end of missions, which is churches among the Gentiles being founded. And that may happen very well by funding local nationals, but you better do an audit. The audit is very important to see what's happening with your money and not be simply happy that you see pictures of people standing up and being baptized and things like this. It may be more of the same extension of the gospel among their own people with American money. If that's your outcome, that's fine, but don't suppose that the great non-Christian populations have been reached in that way.
Yeah, I would just say I myself have taken kind of dog and pony show trips to see work done in other places. And I'm pretty savvy cross-culturally. I've seen a lot of missionary work, and I've walked away really wondering what's going on. And sometimes I think that when funders, particularly who don't have that kind of depth of cross-cultural experience that somebody like me does, because I worked in missions for so long, I worry that they are showing something that's actually not realistic on the ground. So
to your listeners who are open to another point of view, I think there's some that are just convinced that we are going to get better bang for our buck, a heck of a deal, if we fund the nationals, and that's all they want. But for those that are still open, let me illustrate with a story like yours, Ted. I landed in northern Iraq, the only American Christian family there, but there were local believers. They were from the historical background of the Church of the East. And for the last 200 years, missionaries or donors have been showing up in Iraq and the Middle East and finding to their delight little groups of historical Christian people and say, well, all we have to do is to fund them. That's the missing point. And they will evangelize the Muslims. And it didn't happen. A 200-year experiment in trying to convince these local Christians. The accumulation of prejudice that they feel and bias that they have makes it much more difficult for them than for us. Pastor, I crossed into the Christian neighborhood over there. The priest, he poured me a whiskey, first thing. And he said, live in our neighborhood, Bob, with the Christians. We'll have a Christian woman wash your clothes for you, watch your kids, and we'll show the Muslims that we stick together. Now, this was an opportunity. Somebody may want to do that. I broke his heart. I went to live with the Muslim population. We started something brand new, churches among Gentiles. You get the point. But there's even a special word for the Christian population in the Middle East, in the Kurdish world, called Fellah, F-E-L-L-A-H. It refers to a different race, a different kind, a different language, a different history, a different dress, a different way to who can get married into your group. And so when you ask a person from a Muslim background to join with the paid local nationals from the Christian church, to join them, it really is asking them more than Christ asked when the Samaritans came to faith, in John chapter 4.
Yeah, I encountered that in India when I had some Muslim background believers tell me that when they first heard about Christianity, it was through Hindu Christians. And I'm like, what are Hindu Christians? And they were referring to Indians of Hindu background who'd become believers. But like anybody, they contextualize their Christianity to Hinduism. Nothing wrong with that. They're doing what we do, and we contextualize our faith to the American context. But to the outsider, there wasn't the aroma of Christ. It was the aroma of Hinduism in their Christianity that they referred to. So sometimes it does take somebody with a very starkly different background to work in these areas.
Let me illustrate that in a way that may shock your listeners. Suppose a Muslim couple comes to your church on a Sunday morning, and they have been born again, and they present themselves for baptism, and they join your church, and there's much rejoicing. And the next week, the same thing happens again. Another Muslim couple joins your church, really joins. And the next weekend, the same. It's a phenomenon. It's never happened before, let's say, in our story. And 3 years go by, and then there's a vote at the church meeting whether or not to keep the pews. And all these Muslim background Christians who have joined say, there's nothing biblical about sitting in church, and we want a great open space. And now what have you got? You've got a terrible crisis on your hands, and most people that were once in the white church, they feel betrayed. So this is a case for why in the Asian world and the African world, we have to start churches among the Gentiles, churches that Muslim background believers can form, comprise, and govern, and find their own biblical way to work, rather than accreting them to existing churches. And that willingness to trust Muslim background people to start their own churches, I don't see it happening much in the United States. I don't see it happening much over there. So follow the money, see where it leads. If we're going to be biblical about seeing movements happen among Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists, we're going to have to be biblical about allowing these new believers to start their own churches.
So, Bob, something we hear in favor of BAM and marketplace missionaries, if you will, is that missionaries who raise support lack credibility. They really don't have a legitimate reason to be in country serving. Maybe you can address that, because I hear that quite a bit.
Business as mission is a great thing to do. And if Matthew 25 were being written today, I think Jesus Christ would say of those needy people, I was ashamed of myself because they didn't have work, and you created wealth for me, you created a job. And so we have to be about providing real needs for people. That's BAM. But it's very rare when a Westerner can start the kind of business that will also fund him or her. Really, this is just cloudy thinking. In my experience, there's two reasons why business as mission practitioners need to raise their support. First of all, if you can raise your support, then you can take that element, that big component out of your business and let the business run by itself without having to, first of all, or second of all, pay you. But secondly, people that support you, they stand behind you in prayer. What did the Lord say? Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So let's follow the money of people that want to support you, and they will pray for you. They'll be part of the success. They'll be part of overcoming the obstacles. So business as mission, yes. But the idea that there's enough money out there in Chad or Africa or the rest of the world to raise your support as BAM is just not practical.
Bob, I got to tell you a quick story. I was at it was actually a board meeting for an organization, and they were getting they were hearing about business as mission and why they should move the agency in that direction. And the speaker was a BAM proponent. And he talked about his two wonderful vice presidents that was making the business, they were making the business successful. And he flashed the slide up on the screen there. And his two vice presidents, one had been about 15 years with the organization that I served with, Pioneers. The other had been about 15 years with the organization you served with, Frontiers.
Yeah.
So those two organizations had spent many years investing in these two missionaries to make them effective incarnational workers. And then they joined this business as mission effort. And the argument was missionary agencies are really not needed because we can do it through business. I just thought that is really kind of a bait and switch there. Personally, let's throw it all at the wall and see what sticks. The truth is, I have not seen many full-time business as mission entrepreneurs also successfully plant churches unless they do it in very non-resistant people groups like the Han Chinese. So from my perspective, there's also a bit of an effectiveness question when it comes to using that model exclusively. So
let's start businesses. If I were to reside in India, where I've only visited 3 times and watched the business as mission, we've got to overcome the entitlement mentality of just sending over 20-foot crates or 40-foot crates full of food or toothbrushes and handing them out and then calling that your mission. Let's start businesses. Let's create wealth for people. Let's employ people and make that difference in their lives. But this added insult against donating people, raising your support of the United States in order or Canada to make that done, I just don't think that's really there. Not going to happen.
Yeah. I get nervous when I hear the silver bullet mentality, the exclusivism that we have found the way. This is the way it's going to happen. And so I really appreciate your response, Bob, that, yes, let's start businesses. Yes, let's send and support missionaries. And so we appreciate that. Hey, listen, one final thought here before I turn it over for Ted for our special segment at the end of every show. From what I hear, and the data's not out there yet, but missionary sending is on the decline, maybe brought on by COVID, perhaps. Again, the end of the year numbers will probably tell the tale.
Yeah.
But there is this conversation now. It's too expensive. It's not sustainable. You've addressed all these things, and you've really gone back to the scripture. So I hope that gripped people's hearts and minds there. But what does the path forward look like? How do we raise up a new missionary movement of people who will leave home and go to the ends of the earth to proclaim Christ? What's it going to take?
Well, let's make that a question worth some reflection rather than me to stumble around here and pretend like I know. My final answer is maybe, So what is it going to take remains to be seen. We are in the midst of a jungle, a fetid jungle, and we don't know the way out. But I can tell you this, our numbers of people applying, just close up and personal, have not dwindled. People are still planning to get out there when it becomes more possible. Now, our numbers sending have crashed, they're cratered, almost nothing in 4 months. Could we do anything about that? I don't think so. Is that the future? I also don't think so. So I continue to work with aspiring team leaders who want my help, our help, to be prepared to go. There's still a call upon the people of God to send. And Jesus Christ said, I have other sheep which are not of this fold. They too must hear my voice. So let's be about the careful work of soliciting people to go through traditional mission agencies and through agencies which may not exist yet and means which don't yet exist. I'm all for looking around at opportunities which may develop. Haven't we all been rather surprised at the way that this crisis, Corona crisis, has allowed us to innovate, even in little ways, which are going to change our lives, our presentations? I look for more innovation into the future.
It's great to hear. So I'm going to give a quote from David Penman here, and then I'm going to ask Ted the closing question. So David Penman was an archbishop in New Zealand, Bob, and I don't know if you've heard this quote, and I've shared it on this podcast before. It's so powerful. He said, no local church can afford to go without the nourishment and encouragement that will come to it by sending and supporting its best people. You see, churches can't afford not to send their own to the ends of the earth. We're already spiritually anemic. If we stop sending our own and we just hire proxy soldiers, and I believe in the mass mobilization of God's people, but if we outsource this entirely,
Wow.
what's going to happen to our churches? It's going to be disastrous. So, Bob, thank you. Very insightful today. I know Ted and I really appreciate this. And so, Ted, the part of the show where you share something you like.
All right. Well, this podcast episode, something I like is, and it goes with our theme and our talk here with Bob, is the International Journal of Frontier Mission. Missio Nexus publishes EMQ, which is kind of what I'd call a practitioner's journal. It's meant for the frontline missionary. It's meant to be practical and pragmatic. IJFM really focuses a lot on issues that intersect with the frontier. You're not going to like everything you read in here. I never do. But there are always a couple of ideas in here that I find very compelling and very interesting. And it's not expensive to join. If you want to get introduced, they are doing a conference coming up as well, an online conference. The title is The Past and Future of Evangelical Mission. I am one of the speakers, but I noticed I didn't make the speaker listing on their magazine, so I'm not one of the important speakers, which is great. But pick up a copy or go on the website for the International Journal of Frontier Missiology. I find it a good read whenever it comes.
Yes.
So that's something I like.
Me too.
Great. I'll put my name in there too, something we all like. So,
all
Bob,
right.
again, thank you. This has been a really rich conversation.
New life comes to us on its way to someone else. Love finds a way. The love of God compels us. Let's not give up, brothers and sisters, on the sending of new missionaries overseas.
That brings to a close this episode of The Mission Matters with Matthew Ellison from 1615 Missions Coaching and Ted Essler, President of Missio Nexus. We heard from Bob Blincoe, President of Frontiers. Learn more about Bob and Frontiers missions online at frontiersusa.org. Before you go, would you visit our sponsors' websites? It's 1615.org and missionexus.org. There you'll find a wealth of interesting and challenging information about the state of the Great Commission. That's 1615.org and missionexus.org. The Mission Matters is presented through a partnership of 1615 Missions Coaching and Missio Nexus.